Hi all. Peer review works quite differently in this second project than it did in the first. It's much more extensive and detailed, which is great because it's going to provide you with a lot of feedback to work on your revisions. I expect that these letters are going to change dramatically between now and Tuesday. You're going to be cutting paragraphs, you're going to be adding new resources, you might even completely change your audience. I've commented on the peer reviews, meaning that you want to look at your partner's peer review to get comments on your own paper. So if I'm working with Tom, I'm going to want to go and look at Tom's peer review in order to get my instructor feedback. Then I'm going to take my feedback from both people and start to negotiate it and think about what rhetorical decisions I have to make for those important revisions for Tuesday. In addition to the comments, I wanted to provide some bigger issue pictures that I noticed across many of the drafts. Keep in mind that not all of these suggestions apply to you. What you're going to want to do is listen to this whole video and then decide which of these do you see as a problem in your own paper and go back and revise accordingly. The first thing I want us to think about is audience. Audience is the most important element of the rhetorical situation. Remember, the audience addressed is the person or persons being targeted. Every element of the text, including the research, the tone, and the argument, must relate back to the audience. For some of you, the audience didn't seem to quite jive with your message or with your call to write. Sometimes people were writing to conservatives when they should be writing to liberals, or writing to politicians when there didn't seem to be a reason to be writing to them, or choosing a magazine that didn't even talk about the sciences, the health sciences, that is. I want your audience to match what you're trying to accomplish. Here is an example by Sarah. She wrote a letter to the University Health Council's main guy, forget what he's called, but it was a really nice example of how to specifically target a person and how all of her rhetorical choices linked back to that person. So if you have a moment, I suggest you go and take a look at Sarah's letter to see how she uses audience. Another thing I want you to think about is counter-argument. Each letter has a purpose. Often, that purpose is to argue a position. If you argue a position, you also need to address the other side, which is called a counter-argument. So we haven't talked about this in class yet, and that's okay, but I want you to start to think about it. So say I'm arguing that I want to go to break my curfew tonight. I'm a teenager. And I go to my mother and I say, I want to break curfew because I want to hang out with my friends. As someone who's arguing a position, I'm going to have to think about how my audience is going to respond to that. She might say something like, well, last week you were out late, and you're going to want to come back with a counter argument. Well, I was out late last week, but I still aced my test. That's a very simple, kind of silly example, but you really want to start to think about the other side and how you can knock it down. It's important to do that. There are 3 places that you can put your counter argument. You can put it right at the beginning. So you say, hey, I know that you're going to say this about my argument, but I just want to tell you that you're wrong and here's why. You could put it in the middle and kind of weave it throughout, which is a quite sophisticated move, but you would kind of keep referencing back to that counter argument throughout. Mom, remember that A I got in my test. Mom, remember that A I got in my test. The other one is the ending, or to culminate towards it. So what you would do in this situation is you would lay out all of your evidence, all that research you guys have been doing, and then at the end say, hey, I know that you might still have some reservations. However, I'm right because of X, Y, and Z. So once again, a counter-argument is exactly as it sounds. It's looking at the opposition. It's looking at the other side, and it's trying to break it down so that the audience knows that you've thought of it. I also want you to think about letter conventions. Letters tend to have shorter paragraphs. They're to the point. They tend to have an interesting opening and a closing, the closing often being a call to action, though not necessarily. They also have a greeting and a closing, and many of you forgot to format your letters like letters and didn't have closings. Here's a really nice example from Rose of how to format a letter. We can see the date, her address, who she's writing to. The dear senator makes a lot of sense to me, right? She's chosen to use the dear there because she's being formal. And then at the end, she's included a sincerely. Now you don't have to do the formal signature, but I thought it was a nice touch. So once again, to go back to this idea of shorter paragraphs and to the point, some of these letters write almost like essays, and I think that's normal. You're used to writing essays. It's what's expected of you in the academy, so it might feel a little weird to get to break that convention. The reason I want you to write letters is because I want you to start to think about how discourse operates in the world. You're probably going to write a lot more letters in your lifetime than you are research papers. You're only in college for a short period of time and you live for a long time. Hopefully, health science class. So we want to make sure that we're not writing essays. You can do this by once again thinking about your audience. Do you want to be more informal? Do you want to ask questions? Do you want to be more passionate and aggravated? If you're embedding research, don't put in really huge long chunks, kind of breaking it up. And once again, that idea of being to the point. Letters tend to be really short, and the audience tends to be really impatient. So we want to make sure that we right away go in and get to the point in letters. If you're a little confused about letter conventions, my suggestion is to go back and reread the Trimber reading that I had you do a couple weeks ago. And also, we did the discussion post about finding different kinds of letters. And so you should be reading each other's letters to try to get a better understanding of how letters operate in the world. Last but not least, I want to talk about citations. So review the letters presented in the Trimber reading as well as the ones that you analyzed for the discussion post. Note that no letters have formal citations. Why is that? So the reason we don't have formal citations in letters is because it's not a terribly formal genre. You're never going to read an open letter in the New York Times immediately followed by a reference page. It's just not going to happen. Instead, what we want to do, because we're writing for our public audience, is one of two things. One is that you can use hyperlinks to the text. And here I've created a link where you can go and find a little video about how to add hyperlinks to Google Docs. Hyperlinks are used when you're writing the medium of digital. So if you're writing for an online publication, such as the NU newspaper or the New York Times online, this can work really, really well. Hyperlinks are nice because they give a little bit more research, and they also offer your audience the choice of deciding, do I want to click on this and learn more, or do I maybe not want to? Hyperlinks are great for context. So say you're writing about a specific amendment or bill, you might want to include a hyperlink to that formal legislation. You can also use signature phrases. So a signature phrase is kind of the padding around the quote or around the paraphrase. So something like according to the CDC or in a recent New York Times article, right? You can also do a combination of the two. So here I could also have a hyperlink to where the CDC says that we are more likely to die from the swine flu than from a zombie attack. You do not need formal citations. You do not need, paraphrase Gonzo 2002, page 7. Because once again, letters don't abide by that formal convention. Instead, you're going to need to use hyperlinks and you're going to need to use signature phrases. Now, a few of you had research in your letters, but didn't have any kind of hyperlinks or signature phrases or any kind of references. And that's bordering on academic integrity problems. So you want to make sure that you are A, giving credit where credit is due, making sure you include all those citations, and B, making it a little less formal through including those citations in the form of hyperlinks and or signature phrases. Also, don't forget the reference page. I've included a link to this guide that can help you to format that. Now, letters normally don't have reference pages, as we've talked about, but for the purposes of this assignment, I do want you to include it as a way to show me and to show your peers where you got your information. It's also a really good way to practice because our next project is quite research heavy, much more so than this project, and you're going to want to familiarize yourself with how to use reference pages. This project is due on Tuesday. In the meantime, I suggest that you ask me questions on the writing community, correspond with each other. You can always ask for another peer review. It doesn't have to be formal. You could just ask, I need help with this paragraph, or can somebody just look at this? You can do that on the writing community, and we're a pretty good group of people, and so I have a feeling we can help each other out. You also can go to the Writing Center at Northeastern University, and they have online appointments as well if you're on co-op and can't make it to campus. So once again, go and read the comments that I've written for you on the peer reviews. Use this brief kind of group feedback and start to make those really radical, dramatic revisions in order to make your letter as strong as possible.